Start. So the live recording is now started for the 6th of July Planning Subcommittee meeting. I'll be starting the meeting. My name is Gareth Sykes. I'm the Governance Officer. Two formal items to start the meeting off. The first of which is the appointment of the Chair and the Vice Chair for the Planning Subcommittee for the municipal year 2022 to 2023. So if the members of the committee could note those appointments, please. Thank you very much. And the second item is for noting as well, which is the terms of reference for this committee for the municipal year 2022 to 2023. If committee members could note. Thank you very much. I'll now hand over to the Chair, Councillor Race.
Great, thank you, Gareth. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Hackney Council's Planning Subcommittee meeting. My name is Councillor Steve Race. I'll be chairing this evening's meeting for the very first time. This meeting will be recorded and is being live streamed on YouTube. Councillors taking part and voting this evening are present here in the council chamber. If any councillors are joining the meeting remotely, as there is one this evening, they do so as an observer and they will not be able to participate in the discussion and the vote for any planning application on the agenda. The capacity for the council chamber is back to its maximum, including the public gallery, and I welcome all residents who are here to participate or to observe the proceedings. For those participating in the meeting remotely via Google Meet, the virtual meeting technology does have a chat function. However, please only use this to raise IT-related issues. As chair of this subcommittee, I won't be monitoring it. In the event of an internet outage, we will adjourn the meeting and then come back and start again. And I'm very pleased to introduce the members of the Planning Subcommittee as follows. We've got Councillor Michael Desmond. We have Councillor Claire Joseph with us. We've got Councillor Lee Ledette Scott with us. We've got Councillor John Narcross, Councillor Sarah Young, Councillor Michael Levy, Councillor Jessica Webb, and Councillor Claire Potter. Welcome to those of you attending this committee for the first time, and welcome back to our returning members as well. Next, I'll introduce the council officers present in the chamber. We've got, to my left, Natalie Broaden, Head of Planning and Building Control. We have Sam Woodhead, Planning Legal Officer. Sam. And we've got Gareth Sykes, the Governance Officer. Thank you, Gareth. Some of you present in the room would have contacted the Governance Officer in advance of this evening's meeting to register to speak. Objectors to the applications and representatives for the applicant are also present in this room. Before we continue, I just want to briefly outline how this meeting will proceed. We'll hear each planning application in turn, summarised by the planning officer. We'll then hear a 5-minute statement from any objectors, followed by a 5-minute statement from any applicants. In fact, this evening, I think most of the applicants are here just to answer questions rather than to give statements.
That is correct, Chair.
Thank you. If there's more than one speaker from any applicant or any objector, they'll have to agree amongst themselves beforehand how they will split that 5 minutes speaking time. I don't think that's relevant for this evening. Members of the planning subcommittee will then be free to ask questions of the planning officer, objectors, or the applicant. It's my role as chair of the planning subcommittee to ensure that members have all the information they need to make a decision. Objectors and applicants have the opportunity to set out their case and that the meeting runs properly. I will not be taking any questions or contributions from the floor. This is a meeting in public, not a public meeting. You must have given notice to the governance officer before the meeting if you wish to speak. The deadline for registering to speak was 4 o'clock yesterday, and the speakers list is now closed. Subcommittee members are not here to represent either their wards or their political parties. The subcommittee will make its decisions on the basis of site visits that they've made, what we've read in the published application report, and of course what we hear this evening. We must make any decision on an application in accordance with the Council's development plan, including the Council's local plan LP33 and the London Plan 2021, unless relevant material planning considerations indicate otherwise. Can I emphasise that subcommittee members should not take into account or discuss non-material planning matters? When taking a decision, members should not have allowed themselves to prejudge any application prior to this meeting. And similarly, if a member has any interest related to an application on the meeting agenda, they must consider whether that interest ought to be disclosed, and where appropriate, they must withdraw from the meeting while that application is discussed and voted upon. When we've finished our deliberations on a planning application on the agenda, we'll vote on the recommendation as set out, in the published application reports. When the decision is made, that is normally the end of the matter for this committee. The applicant may appeal our decision and objectors may seek legal redress. I advise you to seek legal advice in either case. And then finally, depending on how the meeting this evening progresses, we may take a short break at 8 p.m, although we've got a relatively light agenda this evening, so we may take a decision to go through to the end. We'll now move to the published meeting agenda, beginning with apologies for absence. Gareth.
Chair, we have no apologies for absence. We also have no apologies for lateness. And as you indicated earlier, Councillor Saddiq is joining us remotely this evening.
Right. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. I know we've had one notified already. Do you want to set it out, Councillor Young? Or? Great. Involved.
I also have a declaration of interest first.
Okay.
But I don't think so first Sorry. So the first item relates to a building which I think is owned by Aisha and is currently let to Hackney Winter Night Shelter. I'm a trustee of Hackney, or I was till very recently a trustee of Hackney Winter Night Shelter. I don't think this will cloud my judgment, but I think it's worth declaring.
Any others? Michael? Sorry, Councillor.
Sorry, just a point of order. Do we have a legal officer with us? Ah, sorry.
Any other declarations of interest before we move on? No? Great, thank you very much. Item number 5, we need to consider any proposals, questions. There are none.
None, Chair.
Great, thank you very much. We move on to item 6, minutes of the previous meeting. So we have 2 sets of minutes to approve, the 27th and the 6th of April and the 27th of April minutes. These can only be approved by those members who were present at the time. If we take the 27th of April minutes first, we have the members that are present here tonight who were also present at that meeting were Councillor Levy, Councillor Joseph, Councillor Young and myself. Can I ask that you approve those minutes or otherwise? Approve? Thank you. And then the 6th of April, members who are present then and now, Councillor Young, Councillor Levy and myself. Can I ask that they're approved? Approved from me as well. Thank you very much. Great. In that case, we move on to the first substantive item, item number 7, Alexandra Court. And I believe we're being led by Nick on this one.
That's correct. I will put the slideshow on. Can you see the slideshow now? Can you see that?
Yes, we can see the slides.
Excellent.
Yeah, we're just going to dim the lights. One moment, please.
Will you tell me when the lights are dim, because I don't have view of the hall now?
Yeah, please go ahead, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you. Application 2021-1807 is for the erection of a Part 2, Part 3, Part 4-storey building facing Princess May Road and a 5-storey building facing Stoke Newington Road, following demolition of lower ground and ground floor office floor space in use Class E, to provide 15 self-contained residential units and a flexible use at ground floor level in Class E. There will also be external alterations to the existing Alexandra Court block to include remodelled front entrances. Before I begin, I'd like to draw attention to the addendum, which includes points in relation to M4 3 units and cycle parking, and corrects some typographical errors. Looking north, the application site is located on Stoke Newington Road between Belgrade Road and Princess May Road, and is currently occupied by a post-war 11-storey residential tower block and an L-shaped single-storey perimeter block. A largely unused basement floor covers the whole area of the site. To the east of the site is the boundary with Dalston Conservation Area, and it is located in the proximity of 3 locally listed buildings, which are here, here, and here. The existing building to be demolished had previously provided office floor space. This is the single story element here. A slightly different angle up Stoke Newington Road shows the 3-story terrace to the north of the site with its commercial use as a ground floor. Looking west down Belgrade Road from Stoke Newington Road, 2-story Victorian terraces begin to the west of the site. Looking east from Belgrade Road, a modern 4-story building sits opposite the site, stepping up in height from the terrace and towards Stoke Newington Road. This photograph of Princess May Road shows the locally listed school on the southern side of the road and the 3-story building to the south of the site. Another photograph of Princess May Road shows the adjoining 2-story Victorian terrace. Next 3 slides show the neighbouring locally listed buildings. This is Princess May Primary School. This is the former Simpsons clothing factory directly opposite across Stoke Newington Road. And 82 to 90 Stoke Newington Road, formerly known as the North London Magistrates Court, sits directly south of the Simpsons building. These are all locally listed rather than statutorily listed buildings. This aerial view looking west shows the relationship between the site and these neighbouring buildings. For a little historical context, the Frank Matcham designed Alexandra Theatre once stood on this site, demolished in the early 1960s after being vacant for more than 10 years. It's worth noting that this building clearly had a greater massing on the Stoke Newington Road frontage than the proposed buildings. The proposed development is in 2 blocks. Block A here is on the corner of Belgrade Road and Stoke Newington Road. Block B adjoins the Victorian terrace of Princess May Road. This application follows one that was lost in the cyber attack, which had been through a number of design revisions. As such, the design of the current scheme has not undergone major change during the course of this new application, though the ground floor of Block B has been somewhat rearranged in line with a recommendation of the Dalston Conservation Area Advisory Committee. Block A has a main 4-story massing in brick, along with a top-story setback floor in powder-coated aluminium. The ground floor level would be in a Class C commercial use with 7 residential units above. Block B steps up from the 2-story massing of the adjacent terrace to a maximum height of 4 stories. It has inset balconies that recall the Victorian terrace and is to be built in a light brick. The materials along with details of the design would be managed by the recommended conditions, and the design of the 2 blocks is considered to be a high-quality response to the sensitive location. In order to ensure that the design of the new development works well with the entrance to the tower, a reworked ground floor facing Princess May Road is proposed in a matching brick to Block A, and this is considered to be a benefit of the scheme. The site plan shows the commercial space at ground floor of Block A here. The proposal represents a net loss of former office floor space, but this is considered to be acceptable, given that the rest of the proposal provides 100% affordable housing. The existing floor space has been vacant in this use for a considerable period, and that it is now within use class E, so it could be changed to any of the uses of use class E without planning permission. This plan also shows how the demolition of the perimeter block allows provision of a courtyard between the 2 blocks that allows dual aspect and provides access to the internal cycle store here. This cycle store has a majority of 2-tier parking, but does provide 8 single-tier spaces, including 4 for larger cycles within its overall provision of 42 spaces. The overall number of spaces is 12 above the policy target for a development of this size, and the additional spaces would be made available to existing residents of the tower. The reasoning is understood and the proposed internal cycle parking is considered acceptable. A CPZ exclusion to restrict parking permits being issued is recommended for all residential users of the proposed site. 1 blue badge space will be placed on street prior to the occupations of the new buildings. Block A contains 7 units. This slide shows the floor plan at 1st, 2nd and 3rd floors of Block A. Right on the plan represents north. 2 2-bedroom units are proposed at each of these floors. The top floor of Block A has a single 3-bedroom unit. Overall, the quality of the proposed accommodation across both blocks is considered to be very good. All the units meet the required floor space standards. They're all dual aspect with good access to daylight and sunlight, and they all have access to private amenity space in the form of balconies or a roof terrace. In terms of sustainability and biodiversity, as detailed in the officer's report, the scheme is also considered to be acceptable, with air source heat pumps, green roofs, swift and bat boxes, along with a carbon offset payment. A number of conditions are recommended to ensure that the scheme is carried out appropriately in these respects. The floor plans of Block B show the layout, which contains 8 units. Adjacent to the terrace is a 2-storey house of 3 bedrooms, shown here in yellow. The 3-storey element, shown in pink, contains 3 one-bedroom units accessed from the court. The 4-storey element, shown here in turquoise, contains 4 2-bedroom units. Overall, the proposed housing mix is considered acceptable. It's strongly supported by the borough's housing team, who note that the proposal is for 100% affordable housing, provided as London affordable rent, which is considered directly equivalent to social rent in both the London Plan and Local Plan 2033. The applicant is the Islington and Shoreditch Housing Association, who've designed the proposed housing mix to respond to their own recognised housing need. In addition to the 3 proposed 3-bedroom family units, smaller 1- and 2-bed units within this tenure are in demand as a result of the government's bedroom tax policies. And this additional supply of smaller units would give existing Hackney residents the opportunity to downsize, freeing up larger units for families currently living in overcrowded accommodation. As is laid out in the committee report, in amenity terms, the massing of the blocks is sufficiently set away from surrounding windows to ensure there would be no significant impacts on outlook, daylight, sunlight, or sense of enclosure. As is shown at the top right, the rear of Block B is designed so as to prevent overlooking, with the orientation of windows away from the existing windows of the tower. The uppermost flat in Block B has the use of this roof terrace, which is sufficiently distant from the facing existing residential units of the tower that a privacy screen is considered unnecessary in respect of overlooking. For these reasons, the proposal is considered acceptable in terms of its amenity impact on existing residents. The application steps forward from the existing building line. From pre-application stage, it was noted by officers that the large London plane tree seen in this photograph must be retained. As such, the design of the blocks ensures the retention of this Category A tree. Nevertheless, the proposal necessitates the removal of 5 trees on the Transport for London road network. These are the 5 trees to be removed. The tree on the left is recognised as an early mature tree that is of good form and therefore rated as Category B. The next tree along is Category U because it is failing and would anyway have to be removed under general maintenance. The 3 trees to the right are still small and are considered to be Category C. It has been agreed with Transport for London and the borough's tree officer that these trees could only be removed if they were to be replaced by suitable replacement trees, in order to ensure that trees can be planted without conflicting with existing subsurface infrastructure. The applicants have dug a trial pit under licence from TfL. This process was successful, and the applicants have now proposed 5 replacement trees parallel to the existing location. The proposed trees are shown here within a tree pit and would be planted under the recommended 278 works. The caveat value of the existing trees is calculated at £22,000, and this is required as a payment in the proposed legal agreement. 6 additional trees are proposed within the borough's own highways works figures of £59,000, and these would be planted on neighbouring streets near to the site. For these reasons, the proposal is considered acceptable in respect of its impact on neighbouring trees. It's worth noting with this CGI that it doesn't show the landscaping to Stoke Newington Road, including the defensive space in front of Block B or the trees in front of Block A. Nevertheless, it gives a good indication of the massing in the street. And to conclude, the proposed application is considered to be policy compliant. It provides 15 units of affordable housing in a sustainable location and in a genuinely affordable tenure. The proposed design is considered to be of high quality and would rebuild the street frontage following the demolition of the unattractive existing perimeter block. The proposal would provide a good standard of accommodation and would be without significant impact on neighbouring amenity. In addition to providing affordable housing and a ways into work financial contribution, a payment to entirely offset the carbon emissions of the development is also provided, along with highways works to improve surrounding streets. In these and in other respects, the scheme is considered acceptable and is recommended for approval.
Great, thank you very much, Nick. Can we get the lights? Is that right? Thank you. Right, moving on to speakers in that case. I think we've got one objector, Lorien. Is that right? Nice to see you, Lorien. We're operating the traffic light system, so when it goes amber, you have a minute left, and when it goes red, you'll have 10 seconds left of your 5-minute allocation.
That
Is that
should
okay?
be fine, thank you.
Great, no worries. In your own time.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Lorien Davis. I live at 2 Princess May Road. You'll have seen a few pictures of my house. Number 2 is the only building in the road currently physically attached to the former probation office, which is now temporary accommodation. And this is scheduled for demolition for this project. With my late husband, I was one of 7 local residents who made it to the September 2020 exhibition of proposals, held, strangely enough, a third of a mile away, despite there being a church hall at the bottom of Princess May Road. We made our concerns about the plans known at the time, and we were promised follow-ups and more information, none of which ever materialised. Princess May Road is a designated school street. If this goes ahead, there will be huge disruption to available parking and deliveries. Site traffic will cause potential danger to children using the main entrance of Princess May Road School, which is opposite the new development. Or if site traffic enters from Stoke Newington Road, which is a red route and a major bus route, this will be disruptive and potentially dangerous. The proposed development is not at all in keeping with the architecture style of Princess May Road and surrounding streets, and my property will be overlooked and I will lose light if this is built. It's an unusual multi-layered site, largely because of the access to the underground car park of Alexandra Court. Demolition of the existing buildings will cause a vast amount of dust, rubble and noise. I've asked for a site of structural survey. This has not been forthcoming. I'm extremely concerned about the physical impact of the large-scale demolition, removal work and building absolutely next door to, joining onto my property, which is the last house in the terrace of 40, all standing on beaten earth floors. This seems to me a costly and disruptive project to provide just 15 residential units. These are my objections to the application.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lauren. And then in terms of supporting, no one is making a speech, but we do have Blessing and Kenny here from Islington and Shoreditch Housing Association. We've got Jason from Hunters Architects, and we've got Sean from Boyer Planning. That's right, to answer any questions from the committee. So, questions? Right, just let me find out who's got. So, Councillor Joseph, Councillor Desmond, and Councillor Young. So I'll go Councillor Desmond, Councillor Joseph, and Councillor Young. Councillor Desmond.
Well, thanks for the presentation, which was very clearly audible, and the slides work, which is very impressive. I broadly speaking support this. I think it's an important contribution, but I do think the objector does have some points, and you do need to speak to advisors to see if you're eligible for any compensation if the development is going to have a detrimental effect on your dwelling house. And I would ask you to take advice as soon as possible. What I want to check with our legal officer is a point I was raising when I was last on this committee, when I was much younger, some 4 years ago. I'm in favour of this being a car-free development. However, I have considerable concerns that residents in these particular units are ineligible to apply for a permit to park in the CPZ. I've had a particular case in my location where a doctor who lives in a similar block has been extremely unhappy, depressed, and unable to really carry out her work because she needs to visit her patients and is unable to park in the CPZ in that particular area. So I'd like to ask the legal officer whether this particular exclusion of people living in this property from actually applying for permits in the CPZ has been legally tested.
Great, thank you, Councillor Desmond.
I can't speak to the legality of the policy, and that isn't really what we're here to discuss. I can tell you how it would be secured, which would be through a Section 106 agreement, which contains planning obligations. They are very commonly used across the London Borough of Hackney and other London boroughs, and they are effective in securing that obligation.
Yeah, it certainly seems
Sorry,
effective.
Michael, just before we go back, can I also bring in Transport Officer Joe to talk about the parking?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Councillor. I think just as the legal officer has said, it's perhaps tricky and difficult for us to sort of speak about the legality of the process, but it's absolutely something that is there's precedent for, and we use the CPZ exclusion as a mechanism across planning applications, because we're extremely concerned to ensure that we reduce private vehicle use and dependency. And absolutely, I understand the point you make about the resident who you've discussed with, but I think conversely, LP33 and the Hackney Transport Strategy goes through so many sort of points about the negative externalities of car dependency, that we do see it as justified to use those CPZ exclusions to ensure that less car use is provided. And furthermore, we have ensured that we've got things like a travel plan and a contribution to a car club membership. So all residents will be given I believe it's a £60 credit towards a car club membership. And that really is a much more sustainable way of using a private vehicle occasionally, and having much less detrimental impact on the borough and its residents.
Thank you, Joe. Anything further?
I'm not going to vote against this. I support the scheme generally. It's a matter I'll take up elsewhere, because the issue isn't so much the points you made, which I agree with. We need to deter people from using private cars, get them to use public transport and use car clubs. That's a philosophical thing, and also an ecological one, and one that we as a council support. The question is whether it's equitable for two people in the same road to pay the same council tax, and one person to be able to get a permit and one person not to be able to. And that's the issue I have problems with. But it's not really an issue for this committee, I agree.
That's fine. I think there probably wouldn't be car-free developments, would they, if you could apply for a thing? Councillor Potter, sorry, just before Councillor Joseph, did you want to come in on this specifically? Okay, fine. Okay, thank you. In that case, Councillor Joseph.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the report, and thank you for coming along and telling us a little bit about your situation. Quite a few points I'd like to raise. First of all, if I may, I just want to clarify the existing use, because we've heard a little bit about temporary accommodation, but in the report it does say that it's office space. So what's the situation there? Is it, I mean, it's...
So the site history is a little bit complicated, but the easiest thing to say, I suppose, is that its use in planning terms is classy because it was office and it's vacant in that use. Subsequently, it's been used by the housing needs section for emergency housing. Now, I've done some site visits recently and I'm not able to tell whether it's still being used in that use. I didn't see anybody or any evidence of anybody, and I've asked the applicant if they can clarify. But at the same time,
Can I ask the applicant first and then come to the objector? Yeah, the white one until the red light comes on. Oh, would you mind, Lauren, could you turn yours off, please? Sorry.
This one works. In terms of the units, yes, we currently have people that are currently occupying it, but the agreement we have is that if we're granted planning, then we have to give the people that are staying there 6 months notice, so that they can be rehoused somewhere else, so that we can demolish and build the 15 units. Yeah, so at the present moment, yes, it is currently being occupied by people from the Hackney homeless team. Yeah.
there is a sense in which planning is certainly more interested in the... Can you hear me? Sorry, this seems a bit delay. The planning is more interested in the lawful use, and there is also a sense in which if the residential use carried on for too long, it might change in use, and a certificate of lawfulness could be put in on those grounds. So from our point of view, considering it vacant in its lawful use is probably the way that we should progress.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Joseph, could you use your microphone, please? Thank you.
I mean, I would just be keen. I mean, if we're evicting a night shelter, I'd like to know what's going to happen, what arrangements have been put in place for them, and that would be of interest. for sure. Do we know how long it's been effectively a night shelter, even if that's not the official use? I think my colleague might know because she's been quite involved, perhaps. I don't know.
Well, I'm not
She's
sure
allowed
whether
to comment.
it's probably for the applicant to answer, isn't it?
You had mentioned that there might be some arrangements made. Were you saying there might be arrangements made for them to be re-housed?
We entered into a temporary arrangement whereby we've got Hackney Council whereby they are using it for their homeless for people to currently use on a temporary basis. But the agreement was that as soon as planning was approved, that we would give them 6 months notice for them to make other arrangements so that they can be housed somewhere else, and then we can be able to provide the affordable accommodation for those 15 families. Yeah.
Okay. So just, I mean, I think it's about lawful uses, isn't it?
Can I just
did you-
add that the commercial unit is occupied by Hackney Night Shelter. So the commercial unit, which is the one on the ground floor, is occupied by Hackney Night Shelter, and that's just an informal arrangement. And we do have an agreement with them as well. It's not a tenancy agreement or anything like that, and that's not part of the council occupation by temporary accommodation. It's just to keep the place occupied rather than empty. That's the commercial unit. Yeah.
Great. Next questions, Councillor Joseph.
So these were for the applicants again. Just in terms of the housing provided, well, it seems fantastic that so much of it is going to be affordable housing. It's London affordable rent. I just wondered if you'd had considered providing any social rent, because obviously London affordable is about 30 to 50% more expensive. And I was also wondering if you could explain the tenancy offer on London affordable rent. Do they get an assured tenancy? Just so that we've got a good idea of what the offer is. And I was also wondering about the size. So I think there's 1 3-bed, and obviously we are quite in need of family accommodation. So I just wondered, had you considered doing a few more 3-bedrooms and playing around with that a little bit?
Could I, before the applicant comes in, can I just bring in Nick again on the tenancies? On the tenures.
On the tenure, what's been
Tenures, yeah.
Yeah, so the London affordable rent is 100%. We've got recent figures that show that it while it's considered genuinely affordable, it is slightly higher than social rent. But in terms of the assured tenancies, that's something to be asking the applicant.
Nick, could you just clarify the policy position in terms of London affordable rent as well, in terms of the scheme being fully policy compliant with that regard?
Yeah, so both the London plan and the local plan considered the two, social rent and London affordable rent, to be equivalent, genuinely affordable affordable housing. So we would be looking for, in a scheme such as this, half of the properties that are being created to be affordable housing, of which a 60-40 split would be made, with London affordable rent or social rent being the 60 part of the equation. So that's effectively 30% of the housing to be at this genuinely affordable level. Then there would be shared ownership, intermediate housing, and then there would be private sale. The fact that this is all London affordable rent is very unusual, which is why it's supported so strongly by the housing team.
And Councillor Joseph will remember at least 1 or 2 meetings ago, we had this conversation about London affordable rent, didn't we?
I can't hear the councillor at the moment.
Sorry, it's the microphone.
I'm aware that it complies with the London plan, but just because London affordable rent is in reality about 30 to 50% higher than social rent, I was just interested in whether they had considered putting any social rent in there. I mean, it's a great scheme, or not, but I'm here to ask questions, aren't I?
I suppose we're here to talk, ask questions on the scheme that we've got in front of us, I suppose, and it's 100% genuinely affordable per hour interpretation of that. If any of the applicants want to answer that, they're more than welcome to.
Our discussion with the council's housing team, they've supported this project fully in terms of London affordable rent, and that's what we have been pursuing. And that's from our liaison with the council's housing department. And I personally believe it is more affordable than social rent.
It's worth noting that. Sorry, carry on, Kenny.
Nick, go on.
I was going to say it's worth noting that if you pursue more social rent, then you're looking perhaps at changing some of the other units to a less affordable tenure. This is the way of these things. And if the housing team, as they were from the start, very supportive of this methodology, it's likely to have been because they recognise the fact that London affordable rent is actually genuinely affordable, albeit that social rent is slightly less expensive on a weekly basis.
Next questions, Councillor Joseph, or follow up?
Okay, maybe we could talk about the size of the homes. So there was 1 3-bed. I just wondered if you'd considered maybe doing a few more larger. So a few more.
Sorry, Nick. So this is about number of bedrooms rather than size of the plate, presumably.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, number of bedrooms. Yeah. Obviously, 3 bedrooms very much in
demand.
demand.
So in terms of family units, Nick.
So Isha have come to us with a scheme that they think works for them. As I say, there is a real need, we've had this conversation with Isha, there is a real need for smaller units as well as the family units. And that's partly because quite a few people want to downsize. Obviously, if they do downsize, then they leave larger units available in their stead. Isha have identified that this is the building that the 2 buildings that they want to build. Now, we are able to make exceptions to the strict 33%, 33%, 33% mix of 1, 2 and 3 beds that you're probably more familiar with and you see in local policy and have done for quite a while. We can make a variation to that if we think that the circumstances allow for that and justify it. And in this case, I think it is justified. Each have come up with a mix that they think works for them. They've also come up with a tenure split that works for them, which is 100% affordable housing. And at that point, I think that you could say that it's evidently justified that this housing mix is okay.
Okay, Councillor Joseph. Any of the questions? Do you mind if we go on to some of the other members and then come back if anyone's not picked up? Is that all right? Councillor Young, I'll bring you in.
Just sticking on the London affordable rent question, is this, so I'm not trying to trick you, and please say if you don't know the answer, is this project under the Homes for Londoners programme 2016 to 23, or is this funded under the next programme? And the reason this matters is that the price for London affordable rent is set within each programme, so it will be higher if it's in the later programme.
I wasn't aware of that. I've received figures for the London affordable rent of this application, and I couldn't tell you which of the programmes they come from. Perhaps the applicant will be able to tell you.
Okay, thank you. And I think, I mean, I've just looked this up on the Mayor of London website, so I think this is right. What Councillor Joseph said a moment ago is correct, which is that London affordable rent is 30 to 50% higher than social rent. So it's about 50% higher than council rents and about 30% higher than housing association rents. That's so according to the Mayor of London website.
Nick, just before you go, can I just bring in Natalie?
Sorry, Nick, I just wanted to come in just to remind members that they need to be assessing the application in accordance with the development plan. And both the London plan and the local plan consider London affordable rent and social rent to be low cost rent, and that's considered alongside each other in terms of the tenure split. So just really do need to remind members of that.
Thank you. Can I just ask about the trees being removed? So we've got a tree that we're keeping and then 5 being removed, and then and replaced by suitable replacement trees. I saw there was quite a range of trees in those being removed. Is it possible to tell us a little bit more about what suitable replacement trees would mean?
Great, thanks. Can I bring in Joris? Sorry, Nick first in that case.
Certainly, yes. There's actually been a little bit of back and forth about what they should look like, because TfL at the end of the day are going to choose these just like they chose the previous trees. There is a type of betulus, I forget exactly which one, that's been battered forth for the trees. I know that our tree officer was keen, but at the end of this, TfL will have eyes on those trees and decide what they want to go in. They were objecting to the scheme at the start because of the removal of the trees. Now the trees can go back in. They're content so long as they have control over the trees that are actually planted.
Great. Life, can you give us any more detail at all?
Yeah, the tree that goes in is actually Carpinus. It will grow to a bigger size. It will look kind of a oblong shape. And with time, it will look very nice in front of that building.
Great, is that okay?
One more question on a
okay.
totally separate question. I didn't completely understand the relationship between the new building and the tower block. So I originally thought you meant the tower block was being knocked down, but that's not right, is it? It's staying exactly where it is. So in which case, those lower floors of the tower block, the bottom, I guess, 4 floors of the tower block, will their view be, how will their view be changed by this development?
Nick?
So the development steps up from 2 stories to 4 stories facing the tower block. So the tower block isn't on the ground floor, it starts at the first floor, second floor. So, and then there's the distance between the new building across the courtyard. So while they have excellent views at the moment, partly because there is a car park of Princess May School directly opposite them and just this single story building, they will be somewhat more restricted, those lower buildings. Having said that, in a city context, they are going to be less restricted than most people living on a road, for example, and looking across the road. So it wouldn't be a reason to refuse the application on amenity grounds, as we went into earlier. And the daylight sunlight for those properties, it's detailed in the committee report, but we would find it acceptable is the long and short of it. We see a much greater impact in other schemes that we find acceptable.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Young. Councillor Potter is next, and then can anyone else just indicate? Councillor Narcross.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to have some of the concerns addressed that were raised by the objector. So I wondered if the Housing Association and architects could address some of the issues she raised. So she's been asking for a site structural survey. She's concerned. She lives next door. It's quite. I think we'd all feel concerned if, you know, we were in that situation and we're going to have a building built adjacent to us. So what kind of conversations have there been between that particular neighbour who is going to share a boundary wall? Also the concerns she raised. I know there is some explanation in the report, but I think it's good to hear it from yourselves. What kind of measures you're going to take to make sure the school street works, that, you know, you're keeping the site construction and noise and dust and all those matters to a minimum to consider residents nearby. And in terms of the shallow foundation issue, what kind of conversations are you having with nearby residents to allay those fears about your approach? I think I've covered everything, and also to include the loss of light and overshadowing that she raised too.
Come to the applicants first to answer the questions.
In terms of the parking, I suppose, in the construction management stage, that would be detailed in the construction and management and logistics plan. So that's a fairly detailed report that would be submitted at the post application stage. So that would, that would include the likes of dust, the impacts on the road network, and delivering and servicing of the construction stage. So that usually wouldn't be supplied at this stage. Would you like to talk about the foundation or we haven't got to that stage yet?
No, that.
Sorry.
Typically, thanks for your question. But typically, that would be sort of resolved at the detailed design stage, so post planning. But regarding that, that's something we'll cover should we receive approval. Hope that answers your question. Yeah,
please,
so,
Councillor Potter. Microphone, please, Councillor Potter.
That's only the construction
Yeah.
side of things. How about overshadowing? How are you going to address kind of, her concerns about,
So
the safety of her building, etc. Can you go into that detail?
So again, safety of the building and adjacencies to the building, the proposal will be covered by the construction management plan, which has been detailed as a condition. So we'd have to submit a plan to discharge that condition prior to commencement of works. So that would all be covered post planning. The other question was around overshadowing. We've appointed a rights to light consultant and daylight sunlight consultant who supports the scheme and says it complies with current standards. So in terms of that, we don't see an issue with supporting the scheme.
Sorry, I'm just going to follow up. I suppose absolutely, construction management plan comes as a condition, but presumably you and others have built buildings like this previously that are adjacent to other buildings. So presumably you have an approach that you'll take at this point.
Yeah. Okay. So if you look at the plans again, our proposal is within our red line boundary, so it doesn't butt up against number 2. It's within our site boundary. And appropriate steps will be taken to ensure there's no damage to number 2 of Princess May Road during construction. I hope that answers your questions.
Can I just bring in the objector and does that answer your question about on those 2 aspects?
Well, not really. To answer the councillor's question, there's been no conversation at all with me about this. And I've written several times to Councillor Nick Overhead, who's been really helpful during this process, but I've had no approach at all. And I think this is really important to say it's going to be sorted out. I need to be talking in detail to people. I need to see plans. I need to know what their proposals are, because these are old buildings and the weight of the terrace is on my house.
I suppose, thank you for that. I suppose unfortunately there's a statutory minimum in terms of engagement that I'm sure the officers will confirm has been taken. But can any of the applicants sort of answer that question at all in terms of the communication you had with local residents?
So in terms of the construction, we usually make sure that the contractor complies with the requirements to engage with residents in terms of noise, and they're on the considerate constructors list. So they do that as a matter of course. They will engage with you and also make sure that your property is looked at and checked before works and after the works. And there will be, if there's any need for protection, that will be provided.
Okay, thank you. Can you send have microphone off? Councillor Potter, any follow up on that?
So can I just clarify, pre-construction and during, there'll be constant engagement with particularly the objector that's here today to ensure that, that an eye is being kept on her building and any impacts. Is that what you just said? Sorry, it's quite hard to hear sometimes in the council chamber, so I apologise if I'm repeating what you said.
Yes, there will be engagement before construction and after construction.
So I suppose engagement consultation, as long as the statutory minimum is achieved, then that's the remit of this committee. But the building process, I suppose, does fall within our remit. Councillor Potter, thank you. Councillor, you want to just come? Oh, hello.
Sorry, I was just going to say, is it worth noting that the condition for the construction management plan will be looked at in great detail at the next stage, but also the building control process is there to make sure that buildings go up in a safe manner, and that's really the next stage for the deliberations of the administrative process, the bureaucratic function, whereas this is the land use, the design of the buildings, and making sure that everything is going to be controlled by detail so far as we need to.
Thank you, Nick. Anything further, Councillor Potter?
If you don't mind, I'll ask one further question. So in terms of 4.7.7 on page 39, so you talk about, given the scale of the Class E unit, we do not require that it reaches a BREEAM excellent. So the BREEAM rating, does that just relate to non-residential properties?
Correct.
Is that correct? So that's why. So what is the rating for the residential properties? What are you measuring against?
So you look at things like air permeability for residential properties, but it's not the same standard. BREEAM is non-residential.
So it's a little bit more vague, isn't it, than BREEAM in terms of what you're aspiring to or how you're measuring for residential?
There are other people who would say that BREEAM can be a bit of a tick box exercise, whereas I think that the design to get the building sustainable looks at the various different elements, such as air source heat pumps, such as like the air permeability, like the glazing, the layout of the building, various different aspects to it. But BREEAM is just a rating for a non-residential part of the development.
Could I ask one more question, Chair?
One more, yeah.
I just wanted to ask about the heating and hot water system that's proposed for this building. I noticed the application itself, in terms of the report, it didn't really comment on this, but I noticed in the recommendations, it does refer to air source heat pumps. So I'm presuming the air source heat pumps are for communal, it's part of a communal system. Is that correct? And is there any wider thinking or a bit more in-depth strategy on, the heating and hot water aspect that the report suggests?
There is an energy report. I can't remember if there are individual air source heat pumps for each building or not, for each unit or not, or if it's a communal system on each. They don't feed into a wider network, but there are obviously two buildings, and the air source heat pumps on those, the applicants will be able to tell you if they work for each building or if they're communal ones per building.
Yeah, thank you. It looks like the applicant has an answer.
Yes, they're individual units at present, pre-planning, but post-planning we could review the energy strategy if necessary. Yeah, does that answer your question for individual? And then you asked a question about wider thinking. At present, no, we haven't thought sort of wider use, but just for in terms of the site for now.
Can I ask one more question? Sorry.
Yeah, fine.
Very quickly. So my understanding is air source heat pumps don't necessarily work so well on an individual basis in terms of a block of flats. So I'm interested to know, I know this is not material, Chair, and I apologise, but it is in the report. So I'm interested to know how that's going to work. Is there any way that we can have some further detail on that? To have 15 of the units outside the building, I can't imagine what that's going to look like or sound like to residents. So, it'd be good to have some more input on that. I don't know if that can be a condition to come back to planning authority with more detail on that, because that's also going to affect the aesthetic, which I know is very important.
Yeah, so I was
going to
say,
application.
Nick, that should be apparent in the plan, shouldn't it? Can you guide us?
Yeah. So what we've asked for in terms of the locations of the condenser units is is condition 33. So we're getting that back in for a look before they're finally approved. And we have plans on top of the building that, let me get these. If I just get to the right slide of the presentation. So I can get you in.
Where's this? Can you point us to the paragraph where this is not?
Page 69.
Right, 69, thank you.
So this is how they propose to look on the development.
It's 0.81.32. Yeah.
The condition. I thought it was 33. Wasn't it?
Sorry, Councillor Boswell, can we just finish with Nick and then I'll come back?
So the condition is 8.133. Can you see this now? This up?
Yeah, we can. Thank you, Nick.
So we've got heat pumps on each building, and then do I have a roof plan on my?
Sorry, can you speak up, Nick?
Yes, sorry. So we've got, you can see the above the parapet line, we've got a plant store there. So that's what it looks like. I don't think I've got a roof plan in these drawings. Apologies. But essentially, obviously, there is space for heat pumps on one of the buildings, which would be 8 units, and one of the buildings, which would be 7 units. So you've got quite a lot of space up there, and there's also a green roof on one of the buildings that has the heat pumps.
Sorry, Nick. So you're saying that the heat pumps are on the roof, not on each of the individual units?
Yes, no, exactly. They need to be external and they're on the roof. Basically, that's how they work, because they need to draw heat from the air. So you can't stick them internally or in like an internal plant room in a basement.
I think that members might have been imagining, as I was at the beginning, one stuck onto the side of each of the individual units, but they're going to.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, no, it's because
which is a different. They may not be communal. They may be connected up to each individual.
That's correct. Yeah, no, sorry, I didn't understand that what you meant. I've got another scheme at the moment, which is why it's a live issue for me, where another developer is saying that they're actually a lot more efficient in the building that they're building if they're individual rather than communal, which is something that we're getting to the bottom of. We do have that condition, as I say, on this one that allows us to have a look at them at the next stage. It may be that this would be something that we're interested in revisiting. Certainly it's a live issue on one of my other schemes, as I say. But that condition is there so we can look at it. And yes, it would be on top of the building, not stuck on the side of the building.
Good. Anyway, I think we can agree that it's a good thing that SLC has been on buildings. Councillor Potter, final, before I
It
bring
isn't
in...
that it's not a good or a bad thing. It's that I just can't see it working to have 15 individual units of a flat being so far removed from, say, the ground floor flat, first floor flat. They need to be relatively close. I mean, just from my limited knowledge of how heat pumps work, I mean, what I'm concerned about is developers and applicants claiming that they're putting a certain system in when actually it's not practically possible. But I'm not an expert. I will acknowledge that, but just from my limited knowledge, I would query that you could have 15 individual condensers that would work for 15 properties spread throughout the building. But anyway, I'll leave that there.
That's all right. We can.
Chair.
Nick, do you want to just answer that one about, what's the expectation, what's the policy around this?
Certainly, I don't mind answering it. Essentially, as I say, we've got a condition on it. We can look at it again, but we have heat pumps on tower blocks that are much, much higher than these tower blocks. I've got one on a 15-story building that works down into the ground floor. So there's no reason that the heat pump can't work over distance or in a flat situation. That will be something that we look at the next stage, and it's not a reason to refuse this application.
Can I add, if we are going to look at this at the next stage, can I add another question about that?
Yes.
So if this is going to be looked at the next stage, can the overheating provisions also be looked at the next stage with that? Or can I ask whether they are also going to be looked at as part of that review?
Can you just repeat that for Mike?
So if the heat pump arrangement is going to be looked at the next stage, can we, will you also be looking at the arrangements to prevent overheating as part of that review? The two are linked.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sorry, Nick, Councillor Joseph. Nick?
And just
there is a condition 8.1.29 in respect of overheating. So yeah, we'll be looking at that as well. There's quite a few sustainability conditions on here, because essentially what we need is to get some expert eyes on what these buildings are actually going to achieve, and make sure that they don't just talk about the sustainability benefits of the building at this stage, but actually that we see that they will be properly sustainable going forward, and not just the carbon offset that they provide, but also with decent sustainability benefit.
Yeah. So whether it works or not. So we've got some good conditions on that already, I think. Yeah. Councillor Narcross, you've been waiting well.
Yeah, thank you. So most of my question, I think, was addressed by Councillor Potter's question, and it was just around some of the comments the objector made. So I just wanted to clarify on a couple of things. So in terms of the fact that kind of a structural survey hasn't been done, which is one of the points that she raised, on page 58, it says, in response to the question about sort of damage to neighbouring properties, that it's entirely possible to construct the proposed development without damaging neighbouring properties. Is that done based on sort of previous experience if no sort of surveys taken place? Is that kind of, sort of, like I say, based on kind of having built buildings like this alongside buildings like that before? So what's the ground to be able to make that statement is my question, I guess. And also...
Sorry, Councillor Narcos, could you just say the question quite loudly?
Sorry, yeah, sorry.
It's a bit muffled up here.
Yeah, so on page 58, where it talks about the document responds to the point about damage to the neighbouring property in Princess May Road. It says that it is possible to construct the development without any damaging to neighbouring properties. What basis is that kind of statement made on, given the structural survey hasn't taken place? And my second question is just in terms of the point the objector raised about the loss of light and being overlooked. In the document on page 52 and 53, it highlights some of the properties that there would be significant kind of overlooking and shadowing. And that's the tower block itself, the property on Belgrave Road that adjoins the site, but not the objector's property, which is the only other one I can see that kind of borders the site directly. And is that just because it was decided there wouldn't be significant overshadowing to warrant it being put in there directly?
Thank you, Councillor Narcos. These are probably questions from Nick at this point.
Certainly. So if I understand it, the second part of that was about why the report doesn't really go into that much detail about the overshadowing of number 2 Princess May Road. So I'm just going to show you that amenity slide again. You're going to have to wait because my computer is not the fastest, but it should be there now. Can you see that? So what you see here is Princess May Road and the neighbouring part of the development. Now, it might also be helpful to see the other side of that, but effectively it doesn't go any further back than number 2 Princess May Road. So there's not really any bit of it that could overshadow it. And that's borne out by the daylight sunlight report. So if you look at the daylight sunlight report in detail, it tells you what the VSC impacts are, for example, for the daylight of each individual window. So it's not the most interesting read, but it does break down all of the detail that you need. So if you ever have a question like this in future, you can always have a look at that in advance. Now, the biggest impacts are to these windows here. And as I said earlier, those impacts are not so significant as to warrant refusal of the application. But you don't necessarily need me to go into all of that detail in my report, because it's already in a report that's been read by me and summarised for you effectively. The other part of the question, I think, was the statement that might seem a bit bold on first hearing, that it's always possible to build next to something without damaging that building. And that is a hypothetical situation in which everybody knows what they're doing, in which everybody goes through building control and thinks about the work that they need to do. It is possible to build without damaging, for example, here, number 2 Princess May Road. Devil is in the detail, and that detail is considered by the building control team at the next stage. And yeah, it will be possible. Then it's up to the applicants to make sure that they make the possible happen.
Great, thank you, Nick. John, Councillor Nobles, to answer your questions. Great, thank you. Can I just, I'll go to Councillor Levy before Councillor Joseph first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. It's should the committee approve this application, I wonder whether we can put an informative in that the disabled bay should be sited within 50 meters of the block entrances. Otherwise, it defeats the purpose of the having the disabled bay in the first place. Put an informative in.
It's an on-street bay, so we have control over that, and I've committed in the addendum to it being within 50 meters because I realised that was something that I'd left out of the original report, but it's something that we do as standard, but it's also worth saying as well in our report, so I put it in the addendum to make sure that it's there.
Okay, Councillor Levy, great, thank you. Councillor Joseph.
Thank you, Chair. So just a few questions about the designs of the flats themselves. I'm not sure if Nick or the applicant would like to answer, but I mean, they're all open plan. And in terms of family living, that can be a bit difficult with things like noise from kitchen, things like washing machines, heat from cookers and so on. I just wondered why you decided to make them all open plan rather than having a separate kitchen area. That's my first one.
Nick, can I bring you in on that one?
I think this is a design choice that's made in many places, and it's really up to the applicants how they set these floor plans out. And if the applicants have decided to do this way, I mean, if you look at the house, for example, it's not open plan. Here it is open plan. It's a design choice, I suppose, based on things like where the windows are, where like the constraints of the particular rooms. I mean, you've got separate rooms for people to disappear into, but yeah, it's not something that we would necessarily start making applicants do one or the other.
So there's no policy around it particularly that we would ask for.
There are policies about quality of accommodation, but this isn't really a question of whether something has a good or bad standard of accommodation. It's really a matter of choice for the people who go into the places and also for the designers. And we don't think that there is any reason for us to refuse one or approve another.
Okay, thank you. Applicants, anything to add to that? Or no? Okay, thank you. Councillor Joseph.
The flat roof. Who has access to the flat roof?
The terrace, isn't it? I think. Oh, you mean all of the flat roofs or the terrace?
Yeah, all of them. Can people access? Is it just people on that level, or how does it work?
So on block B, it's the flat that is on the same level, and you have access to roof terrace. And beyond that is for the SLC pumps and green roof maintenance. So only maintenance will have access to that part of the roof. On block A, the top floor flat that's inset has access to its own terrace, but the roof of that flat is for maintenance purposes and plant. So it would only be access for maintenance only.
Okay, you happy?
That's okay.
Great. Just questions from me on cycling, if you wouldn't mind. You've got cycling provision in there, which is good to see. Can I just check around security of the cycling provision? It's a sort of a special interest of mine in terms of making sure they're as secure as possible so that people don't feel they have to use their inside space or their balconies or whatever for cycling. So will there be CCTV? Will there be sort of good sort of security around the room?
So the cycle store has been designed following secure by design guidance. It's access from the internal courtyard. So there's sort of a first stage of access before you get into the cycle store. So there's 2 stages of access, and it's secured by, imagine, a fob system. So only residents can use it.
Okay, thank you. And then you have quite a lot of 2-tier cycling in there, which again, we don't like all that much, but I know there's some storage for larger bikes and Sheffield stands. Joe, I think, is it Joe? Yeah, Joe, any comments on the cycling as we've discussed it previously?
No, I mean, just to say that this was certainly something that Nick and I worked on fairly extensively to really try and get as much single-tiered cycle parking into the application as possible. So obviously we've increased the visitor cycle parking and that element. It's difficult because clearly, as you say, we ideally would not want this percentage two-tier cycle parking. But equally, the real merit, I think, is undeniable, that it brings existing residents who don't have any places to park their bikes, it brings them 13 dedicated spaces. So in balancing those kind of positive aspirations, we do support the provision. And as Nick said, the scheme is, you know, way above policy in the quantum of cycle parking that's provided. So yeah, we do see it as justified.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, any final questions? I feel like we've given it a good run through. No? Okay, great, thank you very much. In that case, we will move to the vote. So all those, and so the proposal is that the Planning Permission be granted, subject to referral to the Greater London Authority and the following conditions that set out in the report. All those who are in favour of that, please raise your hands. Great, that is unanimous in that case. I won't ask for abstentions or against in that case. So thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who spoke on it. And thank you for attending. Great. Gareth, do we need to change over people?
Yeah. So thank you everybody who's joined us for item 7. So that item's now finished. We have in the room we don't have any persons speaking in objection to item 8. So we just have representatives from the applicants who will be answering questions. So if they want to, if the persons for item 7 could now leave the chamber, and then the applicants for item 8 can sit where you're currently sat. Thank you once again for everybody who attended for Alexandra Court. Thank you.
Gareth, can we just note as well that Councillor Young has left?
Oh yes, just for the record, Councillor Young did mention it under declaration of interest. Councillor Young has declared her interest and has now left the meeting for this item.
Great, everyone in place. Thank you. In that case, item 8 will be down phase 3. I think we're being led by Catherine.
Good evening, members. I'm just going to get my presentation up. I won't be a second. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see this.
We can, thank you.
Right. This application before members is a submission to discharge in part a condition relating to materials and detailing of an approved scheme. Members will note that there is an addendum report which amends the recommendation through the removal of 2 of the approved documents which are no longer relevant to the application. Apologies. Members will be familiar with this application, which was with the site. The application to which the condition is attached was reported to Planning Subcommittee twice in 2020, with the planning permission being granted in the December of that year. For the benefit of new members of the Planning Subcommittee, the consent grants planning permission for a mixed-use residential development delivering 584 units, of which 117 are social rented and 126 to be shared ownership, together with a public park and energy centre. It represents a single phase of the council's largest estate regeneration scheme. Since 2020, various conditions have been discharged and the demolition of existing buildings has been completed, with construction underway. At the time of the determination of the previous application, or the main application, members of the Planning Subcommittee resolved that Condition 18 should be reported to Planning Subcommittee, and this is the text, which I'm not going to go through. Details have been submitted in relation to all matters, with the exception of screening to rooftop plant, which is the one identified in red here, which will need to be submitted separately at a later date. I'm not going to go through all of the details that have been submitted, but I am going to go through some to illustrate what's been submitted in terms of the headline matters. But I can assure members that consultation with the relevant teams within the council has been undertaken and the details assessed as being acceptable. So moving on to the materials, there are 4 main brick types with complementary mortar colours. a dark grey, a light buff and a mid buff, which will be distributed across the lower rise buildings, and a light grey, which will be used on the tower. There is also some metal cladding, which will be in traffic light grey. Traffic grey. The brick types and mortars have been assessed and were chosen in conjunction with officers. This slide shows the distribution of the brick types across the development. For members' information, the materiality of the development is predominantly brick, with metal cladding restricted to relatively small detailing elements. This photo shows the sample panels, which have been constructed at the site compound entrance, and I hope that members have had an opportunity to visit them. They are visible from this highway. Brickwork will be hand set on all buildings with the exception of the tower above ground floor level, which will be installed as precast panels. And I understand that the architect and the agent are present who can answer questions about the detail of the construction if necessary. These photographs show the facade mock-up, which was constructed on site. It illustrates the depth of the reveals and the relationship between facades and the window fittings. There have been a lot of plans and details submitted, so I've selected a representative sample to illustrate what's proposed, which I will go through very quickly. Shown here are examples of bin and refuse stores, which will have a louvered metal design and the canopies. These extracts show the frontage details to the retail units and the energy centre. These examples show the residential windows to different buildings and include a cross section showing the reveals of the angled and chamfered bays. This slide shows some examples of balcony construction and residential doorways. These examples relate to the detailing of the crown of the tower and show the balconies and corner detailing to this part of the building. Now, I appreciate this does come across as being somewhat abstract. So this is a street scene elevation showing what the frontage to the Seven Sisters Road will look like, which will be one of the principal elevations. You can see here there's the marker building at the junction of Woodbury Grove and Seven Sisters Road, which is faced with the dark grey bricks. The central buildings are faced with mid-buff with darker grey bricks at shoulder level, and the tower is predominantly faced with the lighter brick, with the ground floor having a similar dark grey to key in with details of the other buildings. These are examples of lobby layouts which are naturally lit and provide internal storage of mail and parcels. And finally, these slides show the proposed window cleaning arrangements, which are predominantly reliant upon davit posts to allow abseiling window cleaning, which will be taken out and stored in when not in use. The windows will be partially capable of being cleaned from the internal space, as shown on the right-hand side of the slide, which will allow less frequent abseiling cleaning to the affordable units, which will limit service charges. In summary, the details submitted have been assessed and are considered acceptable, and there are officers from the Council's CUDS team present to comment if you want further details about the design merits. And as I said earlier, the architect is also present to answer questions.
Great, thank you. So we have a couple of people here to answer questions, but I thought this is probably now the point to go and have a look at the bricks, see how you feel about them.
And it's also at my point in the meeting that I just wanted to mention that specifically more for the officers than anybody who's watching on YouTube or in the future, that the members are about to go from their seats to the centre of the chamber just to inspect the materials. I'm conscious that won't appear on camera or just slightly on camera, so I thought I'd just mention that now.
Sorry, I should have also said there are no objectors to this item. And then it's Olivia and Simon from Rolf Judd. And then we have Sarah and Jamie from Barclays. Sarah over there. Maybe not Jamie. Maybe Jamie? No. Oh, sorry, you're Jamie. No. Right, okay. Well, we've got some people, and then we've got an Isabel as well. So there you go. Great. Any questions about the materials? Okay, great. Councillor Desmond, Councillor Joseph, then Councillor Potter. Councillor Desmond first.
So I was with Justin from Berkeley Homes last night at the Cricket Awards, but I'm not declaring an interest. But congratulations for sponsoring that disabled cricket. It is something I think Berkeley Homes should be commended for. I think this is aesthetically very pleasing, and I'm very satisfied with the colour scheme. As with all these things, I'm worried about cladding because of what happened at Grenfell. So could you perhaps explain, with this metal cladding, what exactly will it be against, and to what extent has it been fire tested?
A key thing, particularly post Grenfell, a key aspect of cladding design is Part B compliance in terms of fire safety and building regulations. All of the components and materiality that we've specified is compliant with Part B and has been approved and commented on by fire engineers, fire safety engineers, and cladding consultants. Essentially, the majority of materials are non-combustible. So the metal, for example, is non-combustible. The insulation, your metal supports and bracketry, which supporting these panels are all non-combustible. There are fire barriers and cavity barriers in the key locations at window perimeters and floor slab compartment lines. Again, all in line with building regulations and fire safety advice. And essentially, then, and as you work back into the building again, any key component as part of the facade is non-combustible, and that has all been tested. And before it comes to site and is procured, it all receives the necessary certification to prove that it is non-combustible. And we, as a design team, go through those elements, carefully to ensure that they are compliant and meet the regulations.
Thank you.
That's very satisfactory, and I'm reassured. The one last thing on that is what level of site supervision will be taking place to ensure that the installation is properly conducted and is fire safe? Because there has been evidence of poor site supervision, not in Berkeley Homes, but in other developments. And can we be reassured that there will be the highest level of supervision to make sure it is as fire safe as you indicate?
Yes, at Berkeley, we pride ourselves on health and safety. We've got an internal build team that are out and active on site on even an hourly basis. We also have independent inspections of our site that are ongoing. I believe it's on a monthly basis. So as well as being hot on it from our own internal perspective, we do also have independent inspections and independent reports, just to ensure that everything that is being undergone on site meets all the relevant building control regulations, and that what we're constructing is of the highest quality and is safe.
Thank you. Catherine, anything to add on that?
Only that the cladding is also a very, very small amount of the materiality. Virtually everything else is brick.
Thank you. I think I was going to Councillor Joseph next.
Thanks very much for showing us your materials. The first point is it's quite a light colour scheme. Who's going to be responsible for cleaning this? Because very often we see new builds that look nice and fresh and shiny, and then 5 to 10 years later they're looking really kind of grey and dirty. So is there a plan in place for cleaning? That's my first point.
I think where we've gone for a brick palette, bricks in general seem to last, their duration is a lot longer than if we'd gone for Render, for example, render tends to weather quite badly and quite quickly. Bricks in themselves, these bricks won't weather that quickly, and when they do, the weathering is more natural weathering. So if you look at your bricks that you've got just outside of your chamber, they're quite a nice earthy colour. We don't anticipate that the bricks are going to turn particularly ugly, as it were. At Berkeley, we take pride, I guess, in producing high quality developments. It's in our interest to maintain them and keep them clean. As Catherine alluded to in the report, there is abseiling equipment, which is predominantly used for window cleaning, but it will also be used just for general pointing and maintenance of the bricks as and when they are needed.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Can you ask them both at the same time? Is that right?
Sorry, Chair.
You do them both at the same time?
Yes, I shall. Just a quick point on overheating. A lot of new buildings very, very warm. So I just wondered if you've done anything to sort of mitigate the impact of the insulation that's often used in new builds. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about that, how they won't be hot inside. And finally, I suppose I just want to, I don't know if you're the right people to ask, but phase 3 seems to have been going on for a very long time. So I'm just wondering when phase 4 is going to start, because obviously so many people are waiting for their homes to be built, and it's a very long timeline for Woodbury Down. Thank you.
Can I just bring Catherine in, because I think that the insulation and other sort of the heating plan will have been previous rather than at this material stage. But sorry.
Sorry, that's correct. And there are conditions, including one relating to G values for glazing attached to application 2019-2514, which was the original consent, and those conditions all have to be complied with in the build out of this, as well as the condition that you're currently assessing. In terms of build out, Berkeley Homes are probably better placed to comment on the timeframes.
Yes, so just in terms of build out, we're currently at the superstructure level. So if you pop down site, you'll see the concrete frame is currently coming out the ground. In terms of phase 4, we're just out to public consultation at the moment. We had public exhibitions last week. We're also working with your officers, Catherine and Joris, as well as other members from your parks team, your streets team, your transport teams, in terms of pre-apps to ensure that our proposals meet your LP33 requirements. We're looking to submit the phase 4 planning application in November of this year. So we're entirely with you. We'd like to crack on site. We'd like to build the new homes for existing residents and for future residents. We're just working with both your officers and local residents to design up the proposals for phase 4. But the website for phase 4, it's the Woodbury Down Commonplace website. It's live if you'd like to view the current draft proposals. They're all up on the website.
Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question, I think, for Catherine. In the report, Catherine, in the comment on page 91, you kind of go through, the various details, but then you end with the reason to say to ensure that the finished appearance of the development is acceptable and functions well, protects local amenity and prevents opportunities for antisocial behaviour. I was interested in the last comment, prevents antisocial behaviour. I'd like to know how the bricks contribute to that.
I'm not entirely sure if the bricks are anti-graffiti, say, but it was mainly to do with natural surveillance and how recesses are dealt with in the facade to prevent loitering and that kind of thing.
You happy? Yeah. Any other questions? I've got a couple to finalise. Catherine, this may be one for you, or maybe it might be Matt. In terms of brick slips, what's our position on brick slips? As opposed to full brick, or
that might be one for Matt to comment on, but they are going to be handset for across most of the development.
So they're not big, sort of hanging slips.
Shall I jump in here? Yeah, we do see quite a few brick slip systems, and some of them are good and some of them not so good. So we'll be making sure that this is one of the good ones, and it's for the tower element. So it's quite a common thing to be using on a tower element of the building.
Okay, great, thank you. And then probably one for the applicant. Bricks and cement are pretty carbon intensive. Did you consider any other materials other than these?
Bricks are later carbon intensive. Hmm. Yeah, go for it.
Your colleague might have something to say. I think she's.
I suppose just taking it back to the original application when it was done, and actually the approach with a lot of Woodbury is that brick does reflect a character of the area originally, and so it's why we're providing new buildings. It's also about reflecting what came in the past as well. So there's the design elements to its use there. I suppose on carbon intensity. I mean, I can see Jamie raising her hand. I don't know if we can defer to a non-registered speaker. But.
Hello. I suppose I was involved in the sort of a start of the phase 3 design, and I specifically chose brick because it was just as Grenfell was happening, and I kind of wanted to keep the trust of the community. I mean, phase 3 is quite a large scale development, and trying to come forward with other materials at that point in time was not something I particularly wanted to do, and I like brick because it kind of suits the area. So it's a bit of a trade-off, really.
Okay, thanks very much. Any other questions on the bricks? No? In that case, let's go to the vote. What's the wording for this one? Sorry, Ashley. 92. Sorry.
Sorry, Chair, I have actually got a question.
Oh, just in time. Make it.
I'm going to ask a question that just Councillor Stopps asked at a previous committee meeting in terms of the permeability of the mortar. So I'm over. Could I ask about that question? You may have comments about above a certain height, perhaps the kind of more impermeable type is suitable, but I wondered for the lower heights whether there could be a more permeable mortar used.
Anyone able to take that one?
So when you say permeable, you mean? You're asking for a mortar which doesn't let water in as freely as others.
Is this about reusing the bricks, Claire? Or is it about not allowing flats to get too hermetically sealed so that you can?
Sorry, but it could also be about the way moisture passes through a building in terms of the overall design. So moisture not getting trapped and being allowed to pass through the building. I mean, that not be. I know that's perhaps in a certain type of design, and that might not be the way that you design your buildings. But I just wondered whether any thought would be given to that. So there's two reasons for making mortar permeable to allow moisture to pass through.
I mean, within a brick facade, there's a cavity within the brick and behind the brickwork, and two things you need to watch for is water making its way into the brick cavity and making provision for that to drain out of the building if it did ever get into the brick cavity. And two ways of doing that is through the use of weep holes, which are provided above cavity trays, and also particularly at lower ground floor levels. If water was ever to get trapped, you want to provide a way for it to get out. So a permeable mortar at that level is actually a good thing to allow water to escape and not be trapped within the building itself.
Okay, Councillor. Yeah, great. Okay, in that case, we're going to the vote. So we're voting on whether to discharge this condition. i.e., are we happy with the materials? All those in favour, raise the hand. Thank you very much. That is everyone. Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you very much for taking time to come and talk us through. We enjoyed seeing your bricks. Thank you. Great. Can we note as item 9 the delegated decisions? Noted. Thank you very much. There was no other business that was notified in advance. Gareth?
No, I'm not aware of any other business.
Great. So please note the dates of the next planning subcommittees for 2022 and 2023. The next one being 27th of July. Everyone happy with those noted? Good.
Yep.
That's end of the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you to
officers.
as well.
Thank you,
Thanks very much.
councillors, and thank you for the reps for item 8.